This is In the Trenches, broadcast 13.
Welcome to In the Trenches, where entrepreneurs, artists, writers, designers, inventors, warriors, and leaders share their stories of doing the hard, creative work that impacts all of our lives. Let the journey inspire you to do something worthwhile, build something bold, and create your life's work. And now, your host, Tom Morkis.
Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of In the Trenches. Today's guest is a friend of mine and one of my major inspirations for creating my own podcast, John Lee Dumas. John is the founder and host of Entrepreneur on Fire, a daily podcast that interviews today's most inspiring and successful entrepreneurs. He's also the author of the hugely successful ebook, Podcast Launch, a step-by-step podcasting guide, including 15 video tutorials. John is an ex-Army officer who served 8 years in the Army, including a tour in Iraq. And when John transitioned out of the military, he worked at some great jobs, but as he put it, he wasn't able to find his passion. And that's when Entrepreneur on Fire was born. In the past year, John has grown his podcast from 0 to 175,000 and counting unique downloads every month. For those who aren't familiar with metrics for podcasting, this number is pretty insane. So it's just a testament to John's work ethic and creative ingenuity. So John, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Tom, I couldn't be more excited. I'm ready to set this place on fire. So let's take off.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you're ready to ignite.
Oh, man. Well, yes, I'm ready to light this place on fire.
So John, tell us a little bit about yourself. I hit some of maybe the highlights, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to podcasting in particular.
Yeah, well, thanks for that great introduction. It really did nail a lot of my key points. And thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. I'm really looking forward to chatting with your audience today. But, basically, I'm just a country boy from the state of Maine. The first 18 years of my life, I grew up in a really small town. Then I went to college on a ROTC scholarship and Providence College, specifically in Rhode Island. And then when I graduated, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant and spent the next 8 years as an officer, 4 years active, 4 years in the reserves. And I did have that 13-month tour of duty in Iraq, as you mentioned. And then I did try a bunch of different stuff. I tried corporate finance. I tried real estate, both commercial and residential. I joined a tech startup, but nothing was really passionate to me. But there was one thing that I was doing a lot, and that was spending time in a car, driving to work, driving to appointments, hitting the gym on the treadmill, just continuously listening to content, whether it be radio or what have you. But finally, in 2009, I was introduced to podcasts and I fell in love immediately. I loved the fact that they were on demand, passionate, targeted content that I could just literally pick up and take with me wherever I went. No more commercials, no more Miley Cyrus. And I was pumped and I was hooked, Tom. And literally I was just a huge fan for 3 years. And it wasn't until June of 2012 that I had my little aha moment. And that was Entrepreneur on Fire. I realized, you know what? I just ran out of content today, and my favorite podcasts aren't coming out with new content for another week. There's got to be other people like myself out there who drive to work every day, who go to the gym every single day, who are looking to consume content every single day on certain levels. And I created Entrepreneur on Fire on that premises, and it's been a great journey ever since. You've already mentioned some numbers. 175,000 unique downloads was my March numbers. April came in at over 200,000 unique downloads. For May, I'm trying to break 250. So, I'm psyched. It's been an incredible journey, and I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, no, I'm definitely one of those people that appreciates content all the time, every day if possible. So you're definitely filling that void for me. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So now why podcasting? Like I know you mentioned that you enjoyed consuming it. So I guess my question then is, did you know that you would ever be a person who would be speaking for a living, so to speak?
No.
I guess, because that's essentially what podcasting is.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And now I'm spending, it seems like all of my waking hours on the microphone, because besides doing 8 to 10 interviews for Entrepreneur on Fire a week, I'm actually giving 6 to 7 interviews on other people's shows per week at this point. So I'm definitely spending my fair share of time behind a microphone talking. And it was never something that I knew I was going to get into. It wasn't a passion that I was born with. It wasn't something that I was working towards. I wasn't a communications major in college. I was an American Studies. I was an American Studies history major. So it was never something that I knew I was going to drive towards. But again, sometimes these aha moments just hit you out of nowhere. I realized that there was a void in the marketplace and that I could fill it. And I also knew that when I started, I was not going to be good because I had no experience. I had no skills.
Sure.
And I mean, go back and listen to episode 15. Go back and listen to episode 30. They were crappy episodes on some levels because I sucked as a host. I had great guests, fortunately, and they carried me through. But as a host, as an interviewer, I was not good, but I kept at it. I was just persistent. Now I've done over 220 interviews, and man, I feel like I'm starting to hit my stride. Believe me, I know I still have a lot of improvements on a lot of different levels, but when you do something that much, that Malcolm Gladwell tipping point of 10,000 hours, you're bound to improve.
Absolutely. I was just going to mention that you're well on your way to your 10,000 hours, so to speak. That's very interesting. So that essentially from where you stood or sat in your car when you figured out there's this huge, wide open, this void in the marketplace for something like this. It's specifically hitting the world of entrepreneurs, right? Because you didn't just start off I'm going to podcast about something. You knew exactly who you were targeting, which was essentially yourself. Is that correct? Exactly. And that's one thing I always encourage people to do when they're starting their ventures. Who is your avatar? What is your ideal client? Who's your target market? And for me, fortunately, I was my avatar. I was who I wanted to be reaching, the kind of people like myself who were commuting daily, who were looking for content daily because they were hitting the gym or walking their dog or whatever they were doing on a daily basis, where they were looking to consume actionable content that was going to inspire, motivate, and it's worked out pretty well. Yeah, I think it's incredible. Not only are you providing some really interesting interviews with some incredible people, but just looking at the numbers, and looking at the names of the guests that you've had on, and it just all about it. It's really inspiring. And I mentioned in the beginning that inspired me to pursue podcasting, not on the same level, not at all, but in my own little way, kind of hitting the creativity gap, which is what this podcast is all about, in the trenches, to kind of target, creative entrepreneurs, essentially, which you definitely fit that mold right there, because you did just that. You took something that you were passionate about, you found this niche, and you filled it. You filled this gap that existed in the marketplace, and you've done a great job at it. So I guess that's why it's impressive. But then also beyond that too, you mentioned all the interviews you're doing for other podcasts, probably not without warrant, right? I mean, it's funny because I remember listening to one of your original episodes, probably around like number 10 or something, is when I jumped on board the Entrepreneur on Fire bandwagon.
Fire Nation.
Yeah, Fire Nation, exactly. And I was like, wow, out of nowhere, you already had some great guests, and we're picking up steam. And I was kind of like blown away that you were so new to the scene, because I was like, these are really good, impressive guests and really good interviews. And yeah, sure enough, I mean, it seems like a few short months later, and you're already essentially probably number one in the business podcasting world. I don't know. I haven't done my research in that. I'm sure you probably know better than I do, but it seems like you have to be competitive for the number one spot.
Oh, absolutely. Myself and Pat Flynn are really 1 and 2 when it comes to podcasts in the business section in iTunes for your non-corporate. I mean, you have like your Wall Street Journals and your APN Marketplace and your Jim Cramers. And, they're normally in the number one, in the top 10 spots. But myself and Pat Flynn are 2 examples of people who are always in the top 10, who are people that just run their own podcast. I just have a little studio in Portland, Maine here, where I'm just talking into a microphone, and it's just me. It's not like I have this big corporation built around me and this big team and this well-known name. It's just me, and it's just really exciting for the listeners to realize that, it just takes an idea, passion, in the internet these days to really get yourself out there. Because prior to launching Entrepreneur on Fire, which didn't go live till September 20th, I had never even touched a toe into the online world. I had no network, no connections. Yep. And since that launch date, I've had incredible success. I've talked to some of the top entrepreneurs in the world.
Yep.
I have a top ranked business podcast getting over 200,000 unique downloads in over 145 countries. I've been asked to speak at Blog World, New Media Expo, .com Expo, Agents of Change, just some incredible conferences to talk about what I've done. And it's all been in such a short period of time, in less than 7 months. And one of the craziest things right now is, a lot of people always ask, John, how do you monetize? How are you making money? Like, what's going on here? And, for me, that wasn't one of my top priorities when I launched, and I never made it a priority. My priority was always to inspire millions and to provide value first. And I knew things would follow. I didn't know they're going to follow this quick, though. And I mean, sure enough, just this past April 1st, so the start of Q2, I was approached by major sponsors. We're talking Audible, LegalZoom, 99 Designs, Squarespace. And they were saying, John, we want to sponsor Entrepreneur on Fire. We want to reach your audience. You've developed such a massive audience with such a great connection. And so they purchased my entire Q2, April, May, and June of all my sponsorship slots, all 180 slots that were available. They've purchased to the tune of just under $13,000 a month. So just 6 months from my launch date, I've turned Entrepreneur on Fire from a business that wasn't even supposed to be a business that was earning money initially to a 6-figure annual income. And it's just been quite the journey.
Holy cow. Yeah, I appreciate you giving us those numbers too, because it just goes to show you what is possible, especially with the right mindset, which it sounds like you have, coming at it from the right angle of identifying what the gap is that can be filled or what the problem is that you can solve.
Well, the takeaway here is the audience. Yeah. Once you build a large enough audience, great things are going to happen. And you're going to build a large audience by just providing incredible content on a consistent basis. And that's what I try to do with Entrepreneur on Fire. And once I was able to get that massive audience, people started coming to me. And so that's been really what's fun, is that now, now that you have a momentum and a business that's kind of rolling down the hill and it has that momentum, you can just sit back and let opportunities come your way.
Yeah. And that actually, I wasn't going to ask this question, so you just brought that up, but it begs the question: how do you now choose what projects you want to take on?
It's not easy because, again, there's so many different things and so many different angles that you can go in this online entrepreneurial world. I like to call it the bright, shiny object syndrome, where there's just so many things you can be seeing and chasing. And, the next Pinterest just came out and the next this and the next that. And, should I start dedicating my time and effort to it? Well, what it comes down to is find your focus, find your niche, really niche down to something that you want to be known for, that you want to be great at. If I just come out with Entrepreneur on Fire and said, you know what, I want to have incredible social media, I want to blog, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then I want to have a podcast, but because I'm doing all these different things, I can only do a weekly podcast. I'm sure things would have been good and I would have had a fun time doing it and stuff, but then I would have just been another weekly podcast. But I said, you know what, I'm going to have laser sharp focus. I'm going to put my blinders on. I'm going to be the only podcast that comes out and does a daily show with incredible and inspiring entrepreneurs. And so quickly, because of that, I became known as Entrepreneur on Fire, the guy that's doing a daily show. He's crazy. He's going to burn out in like 10 seconds. And when I didn't burn out and things kept going, the momentum kept rolling down the hill, then I just became known for that podcast, and that the name just kept coming out, and blogs started talking about me, and other podcasts started having me on as guests, and I was speaking at conferences. And that is how I got big. Not because I tried to do everything good, but because I tried to do one thing great.
Man, I love that message. 2 points. One, just the laser focus. I completely agree. I think that's wonderful. It's actually, just thinking about that makes me want to reevaluate where I'm headed, because on the other hand, which is the other thought I had, was, you mentioned Pat Flynn, and one of his biggest messages is be everywhere. And I think for a lot of people, that's not necessarily the right answer. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think what you mentioned, I think it's actually, there's a lot of power in being focused on one particular thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Pat Flynn is an incredibly smart entrepreneur, and I agree with everything that he says. Now, one thing that Pat Flynn does go into that I completely agree about the be everywhere strategy is not that you want to specifically be everywhere uniquely. You can repurpose yourself to be everywhere. Now, let me explain that. For Entrepreneur on Fire, I do 30 interviews every single month. They go live. So that's an incredible amount of content that's going live through my podcast. Now, I don't have the time to go and then run a YouTube channel with brand new daily content as well. That would just be not possible. But I need to be represented in YouTube because YouTube's an incredible place to be found by people that are searching for specific content. So what did I do? I just took my podcast, did a screenshot of that guest about me page, played the audio of that interview in the background while that screenshot was going, and then just pasted that interview or posted that interview in YouTube. So now every single day, a new YouTube video goes live, and I was able to train my VA to do this. So it's not even taking up any of my time, where I'm being exposed on YouTube by just repurposing my content. So I think it is important to try to be everywhere where you can by repurposing what you're focused on.
No, I think that's actually a great kind of refinement of that message. And maybe it was just a misinterpretation on my end.
No, I think you interpreted it exactly correct.
Yeah.
You should try to be everywhere, but at the same time, when you want to be so focused on something and known for something, you just need to be inventive and be able to repurpose what you're doing in those other areas.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of power in that. On a note like that, then, how is your YouTube? Are you bringing in numbers through YouTube? Do you monitor that at all?
I definitely monitor YouTube, and the numbers aren't great because who is going to want to, YouTube is videos. Who's going to want to stare at a screen that's just a screenshot of an About Me page and listen to different entrepreneurs' journeys? Well, the fact of the matter is that you and I both know this pretty well, is that when somebody does get to a actual long interview that they want to listen to, specifically watching two talking heads talk isn't really that exciting. So people always put that in the background, and then they go and they do their email, or they are looking at some other things that they're doing, some other mindless task that they're doing throughout the day, and they're listening to that content in the background. And that's how people are using my YouTube channel. They're pressing the play button, and then they're just minimizing it, and then they're going about and doing other things while they're taking in this content. So my YouTube channel is getting hundreds of views a day, hundreds of people that are finding Entrepreneur Fire through this. And then a lot of these people are saying, wow, this is actually a show that I do want to go and subscribe in iTunes to. So because of that, I'm getting hundreds of views a day of potentially new subscribers to the podcast and helping to grow my numbers at my base camp, which is Entrepreneur Fire, the podcast, iTunes.
Right. I was just going to say, essentially, then the power in that YouTube and these other avenues that you go through is to bring them back to your essential platform, right, which for you is the podcast.
Yes.
No, it's brilliant. So then I guess the next question I have for you is, what's on the horizon? You mentioned it's, kind of tough to choose what you want to do next with all these opportunities. What is on the horizon for you? I've noticed a couple of things that you seem to be getting into, but tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon if you're willing to and if you're able.
Yeah, I'm surely willing to do that. I'm a huge believer in the brand. So I'm really trying to continue to build the brand of Entrepreneur on Fire. My daily format, that's my gold. Nothing is going to change in that arena. It's still going to be a daily show with incredible and inspiring entrepreneurs going out every single day, 7 days a week, 30 days a month. But I'm also going to be building out the Entrepreneur on Fire brand itself to serve entrepreneurs in different ways. I'm looking to create products and services. I've recently published a book called Podcast Launch, which you mentioned, and that's the number one selling book in Amazon with over 75 five-star reviews in under podcasting. So it's really been a great experience to get exposed to the Amazon store. Again, that's that be everywhere strategy. I just repurposed what I knew with podcasting, created a book, and now I'm being found in Amazon by people being like, oh, who's this John Lee Dumas guy? And then checking out what I'm all about and continuing to draw in more people that way. I mentioned to you about how successful I've been of taking just a podcast, because that's all Entrepreneur on Fire is. It's just a podcast, and turning that within 6 months of launch to a six-figure business. Like, that is quite an accomplishment for anybody in any field, let alone, somebody that's just launched for the first time their very first podcast. So I'm creating a product that's called 6 months to six figures, a podcaster's journey. And that's just going to be the entire step-by-step process of how I created Entrepreneur on Fire, how I found my guest, how I grew my audience, how I monetize, how I reached out to sponsors, the whole shebang. I reveal it all. And that's an example, Tom, of creating a product. So as an entrepreneur, you can become scalable. You can leverage your time. I'm going to be spending a ton of time on this product, but once it's complete, then it's scalable. Then it's just out there for consumption. People can come and buy and learn. And that's exactly what I want to be moving towards, is the creation of products, services, and that Entrepreneur on Fire brand.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that, John. And you mentioned not only that, but there's something that I was thinking of before regarding that book. Just Amazon, again, it kind of makes me think, in the same vein that YouTube is kind of this conduit, I think Amazon is kind of a conduit then for you as well, to build Entrepreneur on Fire, and then you can expand out with these programs. I think that's incredible. I'm curious, when you started, were you doing it all by yourself? Or, because I know you'd mentioned virtual assistants, and I kind of want to get into that a little bit, but I'm curious, did you start out just hustling this by yourself, or did you start out with VAs knowing exactly how you were going to do it?
I started bare bones, lean startup. I had no VAs. It was just me, a computer, and a microphone, and I did it all. Mm-hmm. And then as the business was kind of starting to gain some momentum and start to take off a little bit, then I started bringing on virtual assistants to help me leverage my time by taking control of the social media, by doing some design work for me, from doing some posting for me on the website, et cetera. Just little things that I didn't want to do that were potentially repetitive tasks that my time could be better spent elsewhere. So whenever I found that there was enough work that warranted a full-time VA to come in, I always did that as soon as possible. And now I have two full-time virtual assistants who are working 40 hours a week for me. And just actually this month, as of May 1st, I'm really excited. I brought on my first really just Entrepreneur on Fire member, Kate Erickson, who's going to be the content creation director for Entrepreneur on Fire. She's based here out of the United States as well, and she's going to be just busting her hump on a weekly basis. All she does is Entrepreneur on Fire. That's her sole focus, and she's just going to be creating incredible content, stuff on the website when it comes to actual blog articles and art and just entrepreneurial articles in general, guest posting on other sites, just that creation of content that's so important when it comes to building a brand. So Entrepreneur on Fire is growing as a business. I'm looking to grow very organically and slowly. I'm not looking to take this to this huge level where I have all of a sudden I wake up and there's 50 employees. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to keep it small, tight, and lean and agile, and to serve the entrepreneur. That's my goal.
Sure. So my question then for the bootstrapper, I think this would apply to, you mentioned that as soon as you saw that there was some repetitive tasks that you were doing, that you wouldn't hesitate to get a full-time virtual assistant where it was appropriate. My question is, you mentioned that you weren't making income from Entrepreneur on Fire in the beginning. If you're not making money from, for example, and this is you, the plural you. So if somebody's not making money from whatever their business is, if it's kind of the same kind of lean startup where they might not have income coming in, but there might be these repetitive tasks, at what point should somebody say, yeah, I'm going to hire a virtual assistant for this?
As soon as you can, because honestly, they are very reasonable. They are so cheap. If you go to places like Virtual Staff Finder, Chris Ducker there has created an amazing program where you pay a $400 upfront one-time fee. You tell them exactly the kind of virtual assistant you're looking for, what skills you want them to have. They are on the ground in the Philippines. They go out, they find you incredible people that fit your specifications. They come back to you with 3 potentials. You can vet those people out. You actually interview them over Skype. You can hire 1, 2, or all 3 of them if you choose. And the average pay is between $400 to $600 a month. And that is a huge paycheck for these virtual assistants. They can't make nearly that kind of money doing anything else in the Philippines. And the beauty for them is not only are they making a phenomenal paycheck for what their cost of living is, they also are learning incredible skills that are making them really invaluable. They're not just, pulling up sugar canes or whatever else people in the Philippines do. Mm-hmm. They're literally learning incredibly valuable skills for the 21st century. So my two virtual assistants both come from the Philippines. I pay them both $500 a month. They both could not be happier with that income because it fully supports them and their family. And then some. It's a higher wage, again, than they can get anywhere else. And it's been a great experience. They are so loyal and they work so hard.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely got my head spinning thinking about the possibilities. I think it's really fascinating, actually. And something I've been thinking about probably for a long time. You mentioned the name, Chris
Ducker.
Yep. Ducker, yeah. And I know I've seen him before and read some of his material or heard him on a podcast before. Maybe it was a Smart Passive Income podcast. But I think the whole concept of virtual assistant is pretty interesting. Were you nervous at all outsourcing any piece of your work?
No, I wasn't nervous because I knew that I was going to be very meticulous on the training, and I knew that I was really going to have them be prepared before I set them free, so to speak, and give them some really specific parameters. So if you go in with that, you train them well, and then you set them free, then you really can expect good things. And I mean, one of my virtual assistants has been running my social media, for months now without a hitch. And I mean, there's been no issues. There's been nothing but positive feedback from everybody. And the amount of time that she saves me every week is incalculable because I just wouldn't be able to even do it. So I wouldn't even have a social media platform. But now as it stands, I'm approaching 13,000 Twitter followers, 2,200, Facebook fans, Google Plus, LinkedIn groups. I mean, it's incredible what she's created.
Right. And that's essentially starting from zero less than a year ago. Is that about right?
6.5 months ago, zero, everything.
Jeez, that's crazy. That's crazy. So how's your lifestyle changed then since then? Is it getting crazy, or have you been able to manage it the whole way through doing this kind of outsourcing, through taking it one small step at a time?
I've managed it. I mean, from day one, I was putting in 60 to 70 hours a week. That hasn't changed. I'm still working 60 to 70 hours a week. But it's for a business that I love. It's for a business that I own. It's my baby. So I'm passionate about it. It's not hard for me to be working until 9, 10 p.m. at night if I need to certain times. And, I don't go overboard. I take vacations and I take weekends and I do different things. But for the most part, I eat, live, and breathe Entrepreneur on Fire, and it's a happy existence because it's all I need. And I lead a very simple life. I keep my overhead very low. I mean, that $13,000 of sponsorship income per month is way more than it takes me to run my business and live my life. So it's just great to be in a situation now where I can just sit back and continue to create, having that just monthly income coming in at that level that's just taking care of everything and just allowing me to focus on continuing to create incredible content and continue to create other income streams.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems like that would free your mind at least a little bit, that burden that I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have when they're first starting out of surviving. And now you're moving from that survival point to, okay, now I'm kind of free to pursue these different creative projects. And so I'm sure that's got your mind spinning on all sorts of different creative stuff that you want to create.
Absolutely. And bringing Kate on has just, again, done that as well, because now she's working 40 plus hours a week. She's a brilliant girl, so her mind's spinning in a bunch of different areas, and she's able to take on challenges and tasks that I, would never even have time to think of.
Okay, cool. And I got 2 more questions for you then on that note. How'd you find her? You mentioned, was she in the audience? And how would you vet employees then? Because now that you're moving from outsourcing to, it sounds like, to some more full-time staff, how do you vet employees?
Well, that's a good question. And, I wasn't going to come out and say it because, some people might have a mixed reaction to it. And I obviously don't recommend this for across the board. But Kate happens to be my girlfriend, my live-in girlfriend. And so she's actually seen the growth of Entrepreneur on Fire from day one. She was an advertising executive for a big advertising company locally here and was busting her butt and doing some great things with it, but has seen what Entrepreneur on Fire has become and wanted to become a part of it, as I wanted her to become a part of it as well. And so, we talked about it and made the slow transition over a couple months to when it made sense. And then she made that leap. And it's been a great experience. Of course, there's pros and cons to everything. I mean, you definitely have to try to draw lines and boundaries when it's your significant other, as Kate is mine. So it's not going to, just be this, match made in heaven, so to speak, in a worker's world. We're going to have to work through this. I'm coming into it very eyes wide open. But, we've been together for a long time. I know her very well, and I know how our relationship stands. So I felt very comfortable bringing her in. So that being said, I believe that the best advice the audience can take is you really need to vet people by seeing what you feel like their honest intentions are. I mean, I really want to bring people in who have a genuine interest in improving what I have as my vision. And Entrepreneur on Fire's vision is inspiring millions. That's the most important thing to me. I want to provide value to entrepreneurs first and foremost and see what follows. So people that are looking to bring in others to their organization need to really understand, first of all, they need to understand what their core values are and their vision and mission is, and then make sure that the people that they bring on understand that, because it's easy to erode.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, you might be able to, you might have another ebook or another, full-fledged published book on your hands there, how to successfully, work with family members or friends or family, people that are very close to you on your business and still maintain the same.
On fire.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Cool. Well, John, I got one more question for you, and it's what is your favorite? What book would you recommend to the audience? What's your favorite business book?
So my favorite business book is really my favorite business advice in general. So let me just premise, since this is the last question, I'm glad you said that, because I want to kind of give one final message with this book. Is always the piece of business advice that I give to entrepreneurs when I'm talking to them is just start. I'm not saying take that massive leap into the abyss, quit your job and just throw it all behind and then go at it full force. I'm not saying that. People have bills, they have responsibilities, you have mortgages, you have car payments, you have kids, whatever you have responsibilities, and take those very seriously. But at the same time, just start. Wake up 30 minutes earlier, wake up 30 minutes later, and just start doing something that's going to get you closer to your passions, to your dreams, to your entrepreneurial goals. Do something. At the end of 6 months, you'll be amazed at how far you've come with that 6 months of work that you've put in. Just 1 hour a day, every single day. Commit to it, and you'll be amazed. And then at the end of that 6 months, you in fact might be ready to make that leap. But it will be a lot less scary of a leap, and it'll be a lot less risky of a leap if you take this advice. Number two, the book that goes along with this advice is called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. He's the founder of Success Magazine. It's a great magazine, but he wrote the book, The Compound Effect, and that talks so eloquently about how just taking small steps in life, just doing small things on a day-to-day basis adds up to such massive change over time that it's incredibly powerful. So realize that these 30 to 60 minutes you're spending every day, while it may not seem like you're making a lot of progress at the beginning, will add up to huge things in the long run.
And I think if anybody's a testament to that, it's you, John.
Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, John. For all the listeners out there, you can find John at entrepreneuronfire.com. I highly suggest checking out his podcast. It's fantastic, and you'll never run out of content, essentially. So subscribe. It's like the infinite fountain. So, John, thank you so much for being on our show
Tom,
today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And that wraps up In the Trenches, broadcast 13. If you're interested in checking out the show notes, go to tommorkus.com/broadcast13. That's the number 13. Also, if you enjoy this broadcast and you've listened to any of the other In the Trenches broadcasts, then I'd ask you to go check out iTunes and leave a rating and a review. The more ratings and reviews that the show gets, the greater its reach and exposure. So if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please spread the word. And one of the best ways you can do that is by leaving a positive review on iTunes if you think it deserves it. So thank you in advance for doing that. As always, this is Tom Morkus. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Thank you for listening to In the Trenches. Your creative work doesn't stop here. Join the Resistance, the small but growing army of entrepreneurs and artists putting a dent in the world at www.tommorkis.com. Never fight alone. Join the Resistance.